Chapter 9. When we went to Ascalon before, Dougal jabbed a finger at the map of Tyria. We crossed the Shiver Peaks up through Snowdon route. The Lion Guard have established a string of havens up there to protect the trade. He looked up at the two women. Helene was soaking in everything with a focused, stern expression. Riona still had the self-satisfied smile that she wore ever since Dougal told them he had agreed to go with them to Ascalon City. As they discussed the journey, servants brought in a light lunch. Ewers of spring water were emptied. The plates of cheese, dried meats, and bread reduced to crumbs. There would be time for a real meal later, perhaps. General Almora, seated across from the three, said nothing but nodded. Then we hung north of the ruins of the Great Northern Wall and came down east of Ascalon City itself, looping back westward to its main gate. There were too many char encampments otherwise. Dougal finished. I always thought the northern flank was the weakest, said the general. Problem, said Riona. Most of your previous route is underneath the Dragon Brand now. We'll probably see an increase in patrols along the edges of the brand now. We'll have to move carefully. No, said the general. We don't have time for a long journey. The Legion's truce faction will not wait forever, neither will the human queen. I am open to suggestions, said Dougal. Azura Gate, said Almora. Dougal winced at the idea, but said, There's no Azura Gate to Ascalon City. Riona said, There's one in Ebonhawk, but we would have to go back to the Divinity's Reach to get use. There is no direct link between Lion's Arc and the fortress city. You'll be going through Ebonhawk, Almora pointed out. It's the closest available gate. Dougal scowled at the map. Possible, he said. When we first left Ebonhawk, he shot a glance at Riona. We cut along to the south, so I know the area around Ebonhawk, but once we get closer to Ascalon, I'd be less sure. And while we can get to Ebonhawk, he continued, once there, we're stuck. Even if we could sneak past the Iron Legion siege of the city, we'd still have to hike scores of miles across char-infested lands and through the Dragon Brand to boot before we even reach Ascalon City. I thought of that, replied the general. We have a contact in Ebonhawk as well who will get you out of the city. And for the guide across the lands of the legions, I already have addressed that particular challenge as well. Something heavy knocked on the door, and Dougal, who felt it reverberate through his body, jumped at the sound of it. Soulkeeper smiled. The answer to those concerns has arrived, the Char General said. Then she called out through the door, Enter. The door swung inward on well-oiled hinges and revealed a powerful and lithe female Char standing at the threshold, younger than the general but no less impressive. She towered over Dougal, and the tips of her short horns brushed against the door's lintel as she entered. Her black lips were drawn back over her full set of vicious, gleaming white teeth and fangs, as if in a perpetual snarl. Her heavy yellow eyes scanned the room, assessing everything and everyone in it as a threat and then dismissing them as beneath her notice. Where exposed, her amber fur bore black stripes on it, like those of a tiger, although a tuft of the snowiest white poked out from beneath the collar of her armor, right above the hollow of her throat. The armor that covered most of her fur moved as silently as she did, oiled for stealth as well as combat. She bore no weapons in her hands, but she didn't need one. She had her talons extended, each of which looked as sharp and as long as a dagger. Dougal realized how quickly he had come to accept General Almora Soulkeeper's presence. The leader of the vigil, being a Char, no longer concerned him. This new Char, however, brought back all of Dougal's previous worries. Despite himself, he felt his muscles tense as if expecting some sudden attack. Riona Grady, this is one of your opposite numbers working out of the Black Citadel, Soulkeeper said. Helene, Dougal Keen, meet one of the finest warriors of this dragon-haunted generation, Crusader Ember Doomforge. She is to accompany you on your mission through the Char territories as both guard and guide. Doomforge pointedly ignored the others and spoke instead to the leader of the vigil. With respect, General Soulkeeper, I do not need these weaklings by my side, not for such an important mission. They would only slow me down. Fine with me, Dougal said, edging away from the new Char. She stank of death and menace. Send her and the rest of us can go home. That is not possible, said Almora, speaking to Dougal, but intending her words for the new arrival. Your knowledge will be key once you arrive at Ascalon City. Crusader Doomforge will help you get there. With respect, Doomforge began once more, her eyes boring into her superior. Crusader Doomforge will help you get there, repeated General Almora Soulkeeper, wheeling on the other Char and pulling herself up to her full height, her own claws unsheathing. Dougal didn't think that he would see a brawl break out in the general's chamber, but that the two would establish a pecking order in the Char manner through verbal threats and displays of power. Doomforge, for her part, shrank a little under Soulkeeper's glare and took a step back. Dougal noted that the newcomer had retracted her claws into her paws as well. With respect, said Riona, softer than the Char, but no less indignant. If we are going to use an Azura gate to get to Ebonhawk, we will have to backtrack to Divinity's Reach. We cannot bring a Char into Kryta, much less into the fortress city itself. Crusader Doomforge would be a liability. Say what you like. Doomforge's nostrils twitched as she sniffed at the air. They are craven, scared of the power of the Char. I can smell the fear on them from here. Dougal smirked at the lie. I'm surprised you could smell anything at all, he said. What did you roll in on the way up here? Before Dougal could blink, Doomforge swung out a paw and grasped by the shirt front, slamming him against the stone wall. He tried to speak, but the pressure on his chest kept him from drawing a breath. Release him, Soulkeeper barked out. The pressure disappeared in an instant. Doomforge stood there with rage in her eyes. Dougal peeled himself off the walls and grasped for a breath. Crusader Doomforge, Soulkeeper said sharply. We spoke of this. For the Vigil's sake and for our ultimate goal, we must put aside old enmities. Doomforge took a step back, glaring at Dougal the entire time. Dougal realized that he had a tuft of orange fur from her forearms and each of his fists. He let the fur fall to the floor and then brushed his hands together. In the Vigil, you leave your old wars at the door, the general said to both Riona and the Char. You will go into Ebonhawk together. She drew back her lips as she said it, showing her feral teeth. It was hard to tell under all the fur, but Dougal thought he saw Doomforge go pale. I don't see how sending me into the heart of a human stronghold will further the cause of peace, the Char warrior said. An idea struck Dougal, and he spoke before he thought it through. The only Char I've ever seen inside Ebonhawk were in chains, he said to Soulkeeper. He looked pointedly at Doomforge's wrists. It's the only way she can make it through there alive. Doomforge's slitted eyes widened into full circles as she realized what Dougal meant. Absolutely not, she growled. No human will ever put me in chains. Soulkeeper was not nearly so upset. She ran her claws through her fur on her chin as she stared Doomforge up and down. Then she snorted. She might make a convincing prisoner. I believe we have a set of shackles that would fit her. General, Doomforge's orange fur bristled with the indignity. You cannot be serious. I'm always serious, Soulkeeper said, and Dougal believed her. Like a claw through a knot. This is the simplest solution to the problem. Doomforge sputtered. I will resign. I refuse to submit myself to such. Soulkeeper slammed both of her paws on her desktop. Everyone in the room fell silent, and when Soulkeeper spoke, her words lacked malice, but not menace. I am your commander, and you will obey my orders, she said to Doomforge. I will not tolerate insubordination, least of all from you. Doomforge forced a breath through her nose, then spoke with deliberate and measured words. General, the humans of Ebonhawk will attack me on sight, and I will find it difficult to defend myself against them if I am in chains. We will be your guards, Clean spoke up. Everyone in Ebonhawk would stare at you, maybe even curse at you, but they will not dare touch you. We can't be dressed up as vigils, said Dougal, and we can't just pretend to be part of the Ebon Vanguard. They all know each other. Riona nodded, understanding. Independents then, thief takers, bounty hunters. Even so, we would have problems walking her into town in broad daylight. That would work, said General Soulkeeper. I have to send word to our man in Ebonhawk to make arrangements. As for the problem with broad daylight, there's a solution for that as well. Doomforge's eyes twitched as she glared at Riona. I think you're just walking into an interrogator's cell in Ebonhawk. Stay here then, Dougal said. Kitty. Doomforge opened her monstrous maw and roared at him for the insult. Her breath came at him like a hot wind, ruffling his hair and burning his eyes. Enough! Soulkeeper's voice blared right over Doomforge's roar and cut it short. The general glared at the soldier, her wide nostrils flaring with frustration and shame at how undisciplined the younger Char's behavior made them both appear. Your imperator remitted you to my command, Soulkeeper said. You will control your temper, and you will obey my orders. You do understand. Doomforge's ears folded back at the general's barely restrained fury. She licked her lips as if to say something, but then bit back those words. She bowed her head and nodded. Yes, I do. Good. Soulkeeper turned to the others. This is our plan. This is our best chance, whether any of you like it or not. Using her wide yellow eyes, the general measured each of them up in turn. Dougal wasn't sure she liked what she saw, but she seemed resigned to work with what she had. She turned her back on them and gazed deep into the fire. Stay for a moment, Doomforge, Soulkeeper said. The rest of you are dismissed. I suggest you get some rest before dinner. You'll be shown to your rooms. The two humans and the Sylvari left the general's chamber. Dougal noticed that Riona had a grim, thoughtful grin on her face, and probably could guess the nature of the conversation between the two char on the far side of the door. The Hylek Crusader took them to their rooms. Riona nodded at the door and said, I need to run a few errands here in Lion's Ark. I will join you at dinner. And I would like to explore the Vigil's house further, said Colleen. I think I saw some other Sylvari in the halls. You two have fun, said Dougal. I, for one, am going to follow General Soulkeeper's orders and take a nap. It has been too eventful a day already, and it is still early afternoon. The three split up, Colleen leaving with the Hylek, asking questions as they walked away. Dougal watched them leave and lingered for a long moment in the hall. Now that he was committed, he wondered if he had the right to drag Riona and Colleen back into the death trap that was Ascalon City. Perhaps the Char was right. Traveling light and fast would be the best approach. Never adventure with people you would hate to see die, he said to himself, lost in thought. He didn't realize that his door was already ajar as he strode into his quarters. Dougal closed the door behind him without looking, staggered towards his bed, and set his pack down. The long day had finally caught up with him, and he wanted nothing more than to sleep. Almora Soulkeeper had kept talking about how time was of the essence. If this was the last night he'd see a bed for a long while, they'd have to drag him out of it, even for dinner. That's when he heard heavy footfalls behind him. Dougal spun around just in time to see a mountainous form emerge from the shadows behind the door and come straight for him. The Norn stood over 9 feet tall and had as much mass as a full-grown bear. He wore his bright blonde hair tied back tightly behind him in a warrior's braid, and the light of the lanterns on either side of the bed glinted to his ice-blue eyes. His naked chest was crisscrossed with a maze of swirling tattoos, and he wore only a fur-trimmed kilt and a pair of soft leather boots, both of which bore black splotches of old blood. The Norn let out a blood-curdling war cry that reverberated off the room's stone walls. Dougal ignored the scream to concentrate on the razor-sharp edge of the double-bladed axe the Norn swung towards his head in a fatal arc. Dougal let his feet spin out from beneath him as he hurled himself towards the bed. The axe sliced close enough to him for the rounded side of the steel head to glance off of his temples as it passed over him. He bounced off the bed, which would have put him in the path of the axe's backswing, but for the fact that the first strike had bit deep into one of the bedposts with a sickening crunch and stuck there. Dougal scrambled away from the bed as the Norn took hold of the axe's handle with 2 hands and pulled. Dougal cursed the fact that he still didn't have a sword, and made a mental note to have Almora make good on her promise, should he live that long. Away from the bed, he drew his knife, but when he looked up at the Norn, who glanced back as he continued to struggle with and curse at his axe, the modest blade seemed next to useless. Dougal hunted around the room for something else to use as a weapon. He spotted a toppled chair lying before an overturned desk near the large, unshuttered window. He dashed over to snatch it up over his head. Norn snarled in frustration. By the bear, he said in a booming, slightly slurred voice. If you refuse to release my axe, you damn bedpost, then you will pay. The Norn reached out and grabbed the top of the bedpost and then snapped it from the bed with a mighty twist of his wrist, which was thicker than the length of wood he now held. He curiously examined his handiwork and saw that although the post had been torn free from the base of the bed, the axe still hung embedded in it. Dougal rushed forward and brought the chair down on the Norn's head as hard as he could. As tall as the Norn was, Dougal managed only to bash him in the neck, smashing the chair to pieces. The Norn turned around, still hefting the bedpost in one hand, as if it were no heavier than a stick, and grinned. Good job, boy, he slurred. That almost hurt. Oh gods, thought Dougal. He's drunk. The only thing worse than a Norn was a drunk Norn. While Dougal gaped at the Norn's insane smile, the monstrous warrior brought the bedpost around like a club and knocked Dougal across the room. As Dougal smashed into the desk, the only thing he could think of was how lucky he had been that the double blade had been on the other side of the pole when it struck him. He lay there sprawled atop his desk, dazed and hurting, and struggled to collect any more thought than that. The Norn looked down at Dougal for a moment, nodding in satisfaction. Ah, just like a human, though, he said. Folds like a sheet. Then he put the bedpost on the ground and stood on it while he tried to pull his weapon from it with both hands. The force of his initial blow had jammed it in tight. Damnation, he said with an amused grunt. I need to learn what kind of wood this is and make me a suit of armor from it. Then he laughed at the concept. Riona appeared in the doorway, a look of irritation on her face. Dougal shouted to warn her off. She ignored him and, drawing her sword, moved in to attack the Norn. Just hold on there, girl, the Norn said, struggling past his hiccups as he carried a wary eye on her sword and edged towards Dougal. I take no issue with you. Just let me do my duty and dispatch this boy. Riona hesitated, her gaze flickering between Dougal and the Norn. The Norn saw the momentary distraction and latched himself forward, striking the human woman in the side with a roundhouse kick. Riona let out a shout as she was flung against the far wall. She was slow in getting up. A huge shadow with tiger stripes appeared in the doorway. Ember Doomforge unleashed a battle cry that rumbled the room's walls. Dougal would have covered his ears if he hadn't needed his hands to steady himself on the floor as he scrambled away from the Norn. The Norn turned, faced the Char, and let loose a hearty laugh filled with a bloodlusty glee. Good! A foe worthy of my axe. If I could get this bloody thing free. Doomforge leaped at the Norn. Her claws popped from her fingers like a dragon's talon. The Norn brought his axe and its attached bedpost up before him like a shield, and the Char slammed into it, knocking them both to the floor. Flat on his back, the Norn shoved hard with both hands against the axe, trying to keep the Char at arm's length. Snarling like an angry wolf, Doomforge struggled to force her way past the bedpost, raking at the wood and the Norn's arms with her claws. Dougal shouted, "He's drunk and crazy," hoping the information would help Doomforge. He knew it would only be a matter of seconds before one of them found some advantage over the other, and the battle would be over. If the Char managed to bash the bedpost aside, she would tear the Norn to pieces. But if the Norn could hold her off until he could find some leverage, he might pin Doomforge under the bedpost and choke her to death. Dougal scooped up a leg from the smashed chair. It wasn't a sword, but it would have to do. He charged right at the Norn, howling all the way, hoping to at least distract him and give Doomforge a chance to dispatch him. Seeing Dougal coming, the Norn kicked his feet up hard and flipped Doomforge over. The Char bowled straight into Dougal, rolling them both into a tangle of arms and legs that careened into the wall behind them. Doomforge yowled in frustration and shoved Dougal away. He scrambled away from her, afraid that she might gore him in her fury, but he pulled up short when he saw the Norn stand up before him. The Norn bashed his axe against the wall, smashing the bedpost from it, his weapon finally free. He hefted it in a meaty fist, ready to make quick work of Dougal and anyone else who stood between them. "Hold it," Colleen shouted as she appeared in the doorway. "What are you doing?" At first, Dougal thought the Sylvari was talking to him, but she rushed into the room and grabbed the Norn by the arm. "Gulick," she said, "stop. You'll get yourself killed." Dougal wondered just whose side the Sylvari was on. Doomforge didn't bother to ask. She shoved Dougal aside and sprang at the Norn, her claws flung wide to deny any escape. Behind him, Riona had gotten to her feet and regained her sword. Colleen sprang between the Char and the Norn, throwing one hand out towards each. "No, don't. He's a friend." Doomforge hauled up short, her claws inches from Colleen's face. She glared at the Norn clear over the head of the Sylvari, who looked like a child stuck between two giants. "Explain," the Char said through her gritted fangs, her eyes daring the Norn to attack. The Norn lowered his axe to the floor, leaning on its handle as if it were a cane. Dougal realized he had seen a Norn do that before. In the crypts, beneath Divinity's reach, with these scuttles suspended, at least for the moment, the adrenaline drained from the Norn's blood, and he wavered there. Unsteady on his feet, he spoke softly, with the precision of a drunk man trying to convince others that he was not drunk. "Thunder and blood. This should have been so simple. Find the man who was with my beloved cousin at her death, take my revenge on his triple damned soul." He pointed at Dougal with a shaky hand. "Exit with my honor and hers preserved." "So much for that," Riona muttered, her blade still out and at the ready. The Norn ignored her and squinted at Dougal with glassy eyes. "Bear's bile, though. Damn me if I can't see how a scrawny thing like you could have cut down such a prime specimen of female Norn." He blinked, then added, "Norness, Nornitude." Colleen tried to say something, but the Norn cut her off. He let out a deep sigh, and Dougal swore he could see tears out of the corner of the Norn's great eyes. "She was such a gentle creature," the Norn said, "always tagging along in my footsteps. Who could blame her for being dazzled by my heroism? But mine are massive boots to fill, and now poor little Gaida is dead." "Gaida?" Dougal's jaw dropped. "She was your... But I didn't kill her." The Norn gave Dougal a long, lazy wink. "Of course not, little one. But what else would a human say when the finest warrior in all the Shiver Peaks came calling for his head?" The Norn reached out and put a massive hand on Dougal's shoulder. Doomforge and Riona stepped closer, ready with claw and blade, but the Norn only stood there, staring at Dougal, weaving as he stood. Dougal wondered if the Norn would collapse, and he would have to catch his huge form. "By Raven's black heart, who would blame you if you had killed yourself by now in terror?" He gazed into Dougal's confused face. "You are a brave one, aren't you? I could see it in your soul." Dougal opened his mouth to protest, but for the Norn shushed him. "Of course you didn't kill her," the Norn said. "Just look at you. How could anyone imagine you could manage that?" The Norn paused for a moment, swallowed hard, and Dougal feared that the drunken warrior might become sick. "But that's not the point," the Norn said, recovering. "Not at all. It's not that sweet Gaida is dead. It's that you failed to say a word about it to anyone. I heard she died, but nothing else. There's an epic tale to be spun there, I'm sure, and Gaida deserves for her part in the grand saga to be told. No true Norn fears death, only being forgotten. The Norn's hand grew heavier then, and Dougal put up his arms to help steady the tottering giant, whose spirit-laden breath smelled strong enough to make Dougal's eyes water. As he did, he knew he was too late. The Norn's eyes rolled back up into his head as he crumpled forward. Dougal tried to slip out of the way, but the Norn was too big to avoid. The massive warrior's chest came down hard on Dougal's legs, pinning him to the ground. Dougal howled more in frustration than in pain. Dougal! Riona rushed to his side. Are you alright? I'm fine. Dougal struggled to extract his legs beneath the Norn's bulk. Just get him off of me. Scowling in disgust, Doomforge reached down with both hands and heaved the slumbering Norn onto his back. Who is he? Dougal asked as he pulled himself to his feet. Gulick Odson, Colleen said. Doomforge whistled at this, a strange, low note that emerged not from her lips, but her teeth. The Odson? I already single-handedly defeated a score of destroyers in the old dwarf mines beneath the Dredgehaunt cliffs. Riona blew out a long breath. He's supposed to have stormed aboard the schooner Watery Gravestone, slaughtered Captain Deadbeard, and then taken command of the ship to terrorize the Sea of Sirens. Gaida told me that he slew a mad Grawl with his bare hands when he was only a child, no taller than me, said Colleen. He's a drunken ass who tried to kill me and nearly broke my legs, said Dougal. He kicked Gulick in the shoulder. The Norn didn't even stop snoring long enough to acknowledge it. And he's not sleeping in here. Doomforge grunted. How do you suggest we move him? Crusader Nagadal and a squad of guards showed up then, drawn by the sounds of battle. They gaped at the Norn and then at Doomforge, but they put their swords away at a sign from her. Leave him here, she said. Secure the door and window, post a squad of guards, and come find me as soon as he shows signs of arousing. She pointed at one of the guards. Have another room prepared for Keen right now. A guard ran off to fulfill his orders, and Doomforge sauntered after him, motioning for the others to follow. Come, she said. I can't speak for you, but after that, I need a drink. Colleen produced a blanket and laid it over the snoring Norn's chest, and then turned towards the door as well. Are you coming? She said. I was serious about that nap, said Dougal. I still need to get something from the bazaar, said Riona. To Dougal, she said, can we leave you alone for more than 5 minutes? Maybe, said Dougal, if the rest of the world will stop beating me up for long enough so I can get some sleep.